Picture this, November 12, 1985 at 8:47 a.m. at JFK Airport. He handed over his boarding pass, unaware of the drama about to unfold. His name was Edward Garrett, a defense analyst, a father, and a Soviet spy. His briefcase held a forged passport evidence, enough for a life sentence. He was headed to Moscow, a permanent exile behind the Iron Curtain. Meanwhile, his wife was at home in Virginia, making breakfast unaware. Soviet handlers waited in Europe, while the FBI watched his every move for 19 days. 60 seconds would destroy a family and expose a brazen Cold War defection. How could a government employee think he could simply disappear? Edward Garrett, 41 years old, worked for the Department of Defense. He reviewed classified military assessments in the Strategic Defense Analysis Division. His file described him as meticulous, reliable, and unremarkable. He had 2 children, a wife named Patricia, and a house in Arlington. Neighbors saw them as a typical family, mowing the lawn and putting up lights. But something had changed in the summer of 1985. Garrett began making unusual requests at work, seeking files outside his purview. He wanted information on NATO troop deployments and communication protocols. His supervisor dismissed it as professional curiosity, good for performance reviews. Garrett was careful, never pushing too hard, never triggering alarms. He expanded his access incrementally, building a mosaic of valuable information. This information would have been valuable to anyone interested in Western capabilities. What his supervisor didn't know was that Garrett had been approached 6 months earlier. It happened in Washington at a conference on defense policy. Imagine a seemingly ordinary man entangled in a web of Cold War espionage. Garrett was cautious during reviews, expanding access slowly. He built a mosaic of information valuable to enemies. Unbeknownst to the Department of Defense, Garrett was approached 6 months prior at a conference in Washington. A man named Dmitry Kusov, a Soviet trade representative. Their conversation was innocuous about presentations and coffee. Kusov was charming, well-dressed, suggesting dinner. Garrett, flattered, agreed to network with him. The dinners began in June at expensive Georgetown restaurants. Kusov paid for expensive wine, more than Garrett made in a week. He steered conversations toward work subtly and carefully. Professional shop talk between men interested in international relations. Kusov mentioned Soviet challenges and the desire for stability. Garrett responded with insights from classified briefings. At the 4th dinner, Kusov made his pitch a business opportunity. Not espionage, but a consulting arrangement, he claimed. The Soviet government wanted to understand Western defense, not for aggression, but to avoid being caught off guard. They were willing to pay for insights, for copies of assessments, $10,000 for the first package, with more to come. Garrett's daughter needed orthodontic work, his son a private school. He didn't say no immediately. He asked for time to think. By July, Garrett had decided. He began photographing documents, using a Minox camera film concealed in a hollowed-out book. The first exchange in Rock Creek Park, a classic dead drop, film beneath a stone envelope with $100 bills. The money was real, the transactions smooth, he felt justified. Picture this, a decision made, a path chosen. He started photographing documents. Kusov provided a Minox camera, using tiny film rolls hidden in a book. Garrett left film, retrieved an envelope of $100 bills. The money was real, the transactions smooth. He exploited a broken system. He convinced himself the information wasn't damaging, deserved compensation. The routine became mechanical every 2 weeks in his office. He waited until the cleaning staff finished, the building emptied. He'd pull files, lay them flat, photograph each page with the Minox. The camera, small, silent, capturing legible images in low light. He'd return files, develop film in his basement dark room. A hobby space built years earlier, preparing canisters for the dead drop. Drops varied in location, a list of sites throughout Washington. Rock Creek Park, National Arboretum, a bench near the tidal basin. He'd leave the canister, return hours later to collect payment. He never saw Kuzov during exchanges, the dead drop system ensured if one was under surveillance, the other would remain clean. Documents escalated in sensitivity as summer turned to fall. NATO readiness assessments evolved into something far more dangerous. By August, he photographed threat analyses in Eastern Europe. Communication intercepts revealed how the United States monitored Soviet movements. Strategic assessments outlined vulnerabilities in Western defense networks. Each new batch of documents earned him more money. 10,000 grew to 20. By September, Garrett deposited nearly $40,000 into accounts. Imagine new banking rules, large cash transactions reported. The money changed everything. His wife noticed less stress about bills, credit card debt vanished without a word. Expensive orthodontic treatment agreed to without the usual financial debate. Consulting work, technical writing for a defense contractor, confidentiality. She accepted the explanation. Separate spheres, household, children, career, finances. Compartmentalization created isolation. Truth untold, constant, low-grade anxiety. Dead drop photographed document cache hidden in the basement. He began drinking more. Scotch after dinner, quieting the voice in his head. Temporary. Build savings, secure family's future, extricate himself. But the handler had other plans. A shift in demeanor, more businesslike. Information valuable, well-received concerns about sustainability. Counterintelligence, watching, looking for patterns, nothing foolproof. Thinking about long-term arrangements, activities discovered, relocation. Relocation hung in the air. Exit strategy needed. Comfortable life, consultant, apartment, protection from prosecution. The handler assured him they take care of people who help them. Ensuring valuable assets don't end up in American prisons. He left feeling unsettled. Transaction evolving into something permanent. No longer just selling secrets positioned to defect. Abandon his country, his life disappear behind the Iron Curtain. The idea seemed absurd when he thought about it. Picture this, a comfortable life in Moscow, a world away from home. Imagine the constant fear, the weight of secrets, the life he was leaving behind. He walked through life knowing that his next decision could change everything. Imagine the Cold War's chilling grip where the Soviets protected their assets. Kuzov assured him valuable assets like Garrett wouldn't face American prosecution. Garrett left unsettled, a simple transaction evolving into something dangerous. He was no longer selling secrets. Defection loomed behind the Iron Curtain. The idea seemed absurd, a family, a career, a suburban home at stake. It felt inevitable, a series of events set in motion beyond his control. October brought an escalation, a forged passport in a dead drop. Robert Mitchell, a fabricated identity entry stamps to Western Europe. A note warned, "You may need this sooner than you think," sending a chill. The passport forced Garrett to confront the reality of his situation. Not a temporary arrangement, but a potential defection, a Soviet extraction. Garrett hid the passport, trying to continue as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Garrett noticed things he'd overlooked before. Cars followed his route. A man appeared repeatedly at his coffee shop. The sense of being watched, even when he couldn't identify who or where. He told himself it was paranoia stress, making him see threats that didn't exist. But the feeling persisted. He became hypervigilant, checking his rear-view mirror, varying his routes, looking for signs of surveillance, always on edge. The FBI's interest began in early October after a tip from a KGB defector. The defector provided a list of active Soviet intelligence operations, including American citizens cooperating with KGB handlers. Garrett's name appeared, his job title, access to documents, and a code name. Most damningly, the code name the Soviets had assigned him. Nightfall. Special Agent Donald Rhee, a 15-year veteran of the FBI Counterintelligence Division, was now on the case. Picture this. Early October, Garrett's journey began after a KGB defector's tip. The defector, known to few, revealed Soviet intel operations in the US. Garrett's name surfaced, his role access, and a chilling code name, Nightfall. Special Agent Donald Rhee, a seasoned FBI veteran, took the lead. Rhee, familiar with espionage, sensed something amiss in Garrett's file. Garrett didn't fit the mold, no ideology, no Soviet sympathies, just money woes. Rhee knew such individuals often deceive themselves, thinking they're in control. Surveillance began monitoring communications, tracking finances, documenting movements. The FBI soon confirmed the defector's report, unexplained deposits. Phone taps revealed cryptic coded conversations. Physical surveillance caught him at odd locations, aimless stops. Parks brief, walks off the beaten path. Something was definitely amiss. By mid-October, the FBI identified Kuzov, a Soviet trade representative. Agents photographed Garrett meeting Kuzov in Georgetown and Alexandria. Kuzov, a known KGB officer, confirmed the severity of the situation. This wasn't low-level. It was a targeted recruitment for NATO secrets. The Soviets were running it professionally, Rhee realized. Rhee faced a decision: confront Garrett or continue surveillance. Standard procedure was to offer a deal, but the timing felt wrong. Garrett had only been spying for a few months. More could be uncovered. Moving too quickly might miss other players' broader patterns. Rhee decided to let Garrett run continuing meticulous surveillance, documenting every meeting, dead-drop classified document assessed, building an airtight case to guarantee a conviction. Rhee suspected there was more to uncover, a deeper game at play. Moving too fast might alert other players in the network. Surveillance continued meticulous and comprehensive. They would build an airtight case, guaranteeing a conviction. A clear message to anyone considering betraying their country. If Garrett tried to defect, they would be ready. Garrett sensed the walls closing in, though he didn't know why. In late October, he told Patricia about a special project, planting seeds for an explanation if he needed to leave. He began consolidating his finances, withdrawing cash. He spent more time in his basement, organizing materials. A forged passport, cash contact info, and a plan for Moscow. Conversations with Kuzov took on an urgent tone in November. Moscow was concerned about his security, Kuzov informed Garrett. Increased FBI activity warranted caution, Kuzov warned. Kuzov suggested Garrett take a vacation to Europe. A plane ticket to Vienna, then Prague, then Moscow. In Vienna, Soviet officers would facilitate his travel. Garrett felt the finality of what was being proposed. If he boarded that flight, there would be no coming back. Leaving behind his wife, children, career, and country, he would spend his life in Moscow under their control. He made his choice on November 10th, 2 days before the flight. He told Patricia he had an emergency meeting in New York. He withdrew $15,000 from their savings. Imagine the weight of prison family lost nation shamed. He chose on November 10th, 2 days before flight. He would go through with it. He told Patricia of a New York meeting, a crisis needing his expertise. 2 suitcases more than needed, but not suspicious. Clothes, toiletries for a longer stay. He withdrew $15,000 of business expense to be reimbursed later, he told Patricia. November 11th, Garrett did not sleep. He lay beside Patricia, listening children asleep. Confess American prison or Moscow apartment. The choice seemed obvious, framed that way. November 12th, Garrett rose, dressed in grey. Suit bought for the trip. Suitcases to the Carr family asleep. A vague, apologetic note on the table. He'd be away. He'd call, don't worry. Darkened windows. Would he see it again? Pre-dawn darkness to JFK. Empty highways. Plans racing new life in Moscow. Safety apartment consulting for Soviet Ministry of Defense, protection from prosecution. Garrett never intended to return to the United States. He arrived just after 6. Long-term parking international terminal. Morning rush business people, tourists. Rolling wheels, muffled announcements. Garrett checked in without incident. Forged passport, as Robert Mitchell's security passed. Proceeded to the gate. Coffee newspaper view of the tarmac. Allowed himself to relax. 2 hours he'd be in the air. 12 hours beyond American law. But the FBI had other plans. Special Agent Donald Rhee, lead investigator. Rhee positioned his team throughout the terminal, watching every move. 2 agents sat near the gate, dressed as travelers, their eyes scanning. Picture this. The terminal, a stage set for a high-stakes drama. Imagine the tension, the weight of impending capture. The clock is ticking, the stakes are high, and time is running out. Garrett, using a forged passport, checked in for his flight without any issues. He passed through security, identifying himself as Robert Mitchell. Garrett proceeded to the gate, bought a coffee and a newspaper. He settled into a seat with a view of the tarmac, relaxing before his flight. In 2 hours, he would be in the air, and in 12, beyond American law. But the FBI had other plans, led by Special Agent Donald Rhee. Rhee positioned his team throughout the terminal, ready to intercept. 2 more agents posed as airline employees near the jetway entrance. Rhee waited in a security office, monitoring communications. The arrest warrant was signed, charges of espionage were airtight. At 8:47, boarding began for Flight 447. Garrett joined the line, handing his boarding pass to the gate agent. He took 3 steps toward the jetway when Agent Rhee gave the signal. The arrest happened in seconds. 6 agents emerged with guns drawn. An agent identified himself, instructing Garrett not to move. Another agent reached for Garrett's briefcase, which he released. Garrett's face went pale, his mouth opened, but no words came. The gate area fell silent as people watched the unfolding scene. Rhee approached, displaying his badge and reading Garrett his rights. Passengers backed away, creating a semicircle of empty space. Airport security escorted Garrett away from public view. Flight 447 was delayed as agents searched the plane. His briefcase contained a forged passport and handwritten notes. Patricia Garrett learned of her husband's arrest at her home. She insisted there was a mistake, that Edward was a loyal American. Imagine codes so complex analysts need weeks to decipher them. Patricia Garrett learned of her husband's arrest on November 12th. They informed her Edward was in custody. She insisted it was a mistake. He was a loyal American. Reality settled in when she saw her husband later. 6 months later, she filed for divorce. The investigation into Garrett's activities expanded rapidly. They seized documents, files, and financial records. He was living two lives, a loyal worker and a spy. Bank statements showed unexplained deposits of $60,000. A second camera and instructions were found in his basement. He accessed classified materials beyond his authorization. NATO plans, reconnaissance, and early warning systems were compromised. A task force assessed the damage for months. What he provided compromised operations and endangered personnel. NATO exercises were reconfigured. Protocols were changed. The cost was estimated in the tens of millions. Dmitry Kuzov disappeared after Garrett's arrest. He was declared persona non grata and barred from the United States. Diplomatic tensions escalated between the US and the Soviets. American diplomats were quietly asked to leave Moscow. Garrett's trial began in March of 1986. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against him. Surveillance photos, phone calls, and classified documents. His defense argued he was entrapped and manipulated. Picture this 1986 as officials were asked to leave the country. The case was then transferred to the District of Columbia for trial. Garrett's trial began in March of 1986, a pivotal moment. FBI agents testified, detailing dead drops and meetings with contacts. The most damning evidence the classified documents themselves exposed. Garrett's defense argued entrapment manipulation by foreign operatives. They claimed his actions didn't rise to the level of the charges. But the argument failed, the jury unconvinced by the defense's claims. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before reaching a verdict. Guilty verdicts on all counts, a devastating blow to Garrett. Sentencing was scheduled for May, the judge known for strict adherence. Legal experts predicted a substantial prison term, possibly life. On May 23, 1986, Garrett faced his sentence. He had lost weight, his face drawn a shadow of his former self. His attorney pleaded for leniency, citing cooperation and remorse. The prosecution detailed the harm caused, lives endangered, advantages lost. The judge imposed a 35-year term under the Espionage Act. He violated a sacred trust, trading security for personal gain. Garrett was remanded to custody, transferred to a maximum security facility. He would spend the next 3.5 decades in prison. For Patricia and her children, the aftermath was devastating. They became pariahs, neighbors crossing the street to avoid them. Patricia moved her family to upstate New York, seeking a fresh start. Sarah would later write about the shame and anger of her father's actions. Years later, declassified documents revealed the FBI's deeper concerns. Imagine the children trying to rebuild their lives far from the spotlight. His daughter Sarah wrote of the shame and anger of her father's actions. Michael, the son, lived quietly as an accountant. His past, unknown to his firm. Garrett was one of many approached by Soviet intelligence in the 1980s. A KGB defector provided the tip that led to Garrett's surveillance. Edward Garrett served his sentence, quietly working in the prison library. His wife never visited, and his children's visits became strained and stopped. He spent his time reading history, philosophy, perhaps seeking understanding. Released in September of 2021 at the age of 77. The Cold War was a distant memory. The world had changed beyond recognition. He lived in a halfway house in Pennsylvania, working briefly at a warehouse. He gave no interviews and made no attempt to contact his ex-wife or children. The Garrett case remains a footnote, a reminder of unexpected betrayal. Ordinary people can make extraordinarily bad decisions with lasting consequences. He walked toward the end of everything he'd known too late to turn back.